BHAG's supposed to be unachievable, but like Microsoft and Bill Gates, he came out with a BHAG of wanting a computer on every desk in every school in the world, and I thought he was crazy.
Michael Sherlock turned Brumby's Bakery into a $100 million franchise empire, expanding to over 300 stores across Australia and New Zealand. Now, he's applying decades of leadership and strategy to the world of commercial real estate.
Like if you're going to buy McDonald's, they make you work in there for 12 months. Franchising isn't always the answer. You've got to make sure that...
Michael, welcome to The House Story.
Thanks very much. Good to be here in North Sydney.
Yes, we're very excited. Why don't we start off, Michael, and just go backwards? Maybe you can tell me a little bit about your early business life.
The first business that I was involved in was Brumby's, and Brumby's used to be called Old Style Bread Centre. Okay, so it started in 1975. I first worked there in 1979 after I'd travelled the world for 4 years. So I didn't start it. It was started by the guy that started Baker's Delight, Roger Gillespie. So I'm not the founder, Roger is, and then there are a lot of people that were around for a number of years. So I was probably the longest. I was almost there for 30 years.
Wow. Okay. And so talk me through a little bit about your journey with Brumby's. Where did you start as and how did you enter
I started off as an accountant because I went to university, studied accountancy, and then in order to fund myself, I took a studentship. That's what you did back then. And then I became a bookkeeper. And then after Roger left, there was a bit of chaos and they made me in charge.
Oh, so you went straight from being an accountant straight into the CEO role?
Yeah.
So
it wasn't anything to be a CEO of. I think there were only 3 stores in Queensland. So, yeah, okay. I was made in charge in Queensland.
Okay. And talk to me about what happened next.
They were going to open a whole lot of stores. They asked me what I thought, and I went around and looked at them. I didn't think they were very good. So they said, all right, you find them. So, yeah, I just had to stumble along. But I always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. So, we opened a store here, there, and just kept going. And then after a while, using voluntary labour and all of that wasn't going to work. But then we spoke to a guy called Howard Ballon. He's the father of franchising in Australia. He started everything in franchising, goes back to him, fuel and McDonald's and all that. He was the first guy, a Canadian guy that come out here and married an Australian. So we met Howard and we said, okay, you've got people without any money that are unskilled. That's what franchising is. That's what I call the owner's eye. So we were taking people like that were students, and so we decided that we'd take that to franchising. So we first started franchising back then.
Wow.
In the I don't know, what was that, about 82 or 83 or something like that. And it was run separately. So Melbourne was run separately to Queensland. So I started growing Queensland.
Interesting. And how many locations did you guys get to before?
Well, I exited in 2007, so I was with it all that time. And by that time, we had 321 with about 50 due to open. So it was really booming. It was going really well.
Huge, yeah.
And we were bought out by Retail Food Group in a hostile takeover. So I tried to resist them, and it's like a game of poker when you get on the ASX. Wow. So CM1 and Rasia won, so it took about 9 months, but they put more cards on the table. I couldn't match it, so I had to walk away. So when you're listed, then it's you get control of so many shares, and then you've got to make a takeover offer under the rules of the ASX.
So going from 3 locations to 300 is huge. Is there something that you look back at when you did that? Anything that you would give advice to other business owners or entrepreneurs wanting to do the same in franchising that you think?
Yeah, well, you've got to have, well, first of all, the main thing, people have got to work hard, follow the system and make money. So you've got to have a good system. You've got to have something that's duplicatable and scalable. So bakeries back then, that was the case, and we'd get people that couldn't boil an egg, and in 3 months they could make all the products sold in the store. But there was a trick to it, because there's yeast-raised goods and all the other goods. So it was only the yeast-raised goods that we taught them how to make, and the other things were made in a factory and bought in, frozen, like pies and croissants and that, so the pastry thing. So it was just the yeast-raised. So we were able to, we'd get somebody that hadn't baked before, and after 3 months they'd put a loaf of bread in a bread show against everyone else and they'd win a prize. So it was very simple, a very narrow band and focused. So it was focused on, if you follow these steps, then you could make a lot of money.
So again, that's a huge jump from 3 to 300.
Just do it one at a time.
Yeah, it was. But I suppose it requires a different kind of person to go from 3 to 300, right?
Well, that's why franchising is good, because you're using OPM.
OPM?
Other people's money.
Okay, I meant like for you as a leader, right? It takes quite a lot for you to reinvent yourself throughout that process, because I assume the Michael that started with 3 locations or at 3 locations was quite different to the individual that left at 300, right?
Well, I wasn't the owner at 3 locations. So what happened is this group that I was referring to before, they went into receivership in 88. And so in Brisbane, we had a thing called Expo, so Expo 88. So so the receivers came in and stripped the company and they put it up for sale. So long story short, I was with a consortium, other people, we put a consortium together, and I think we were down to about 51 stores, and we all put in $2,000 each and bought it in conjunction with one of the major flour suppliers that no longer exist, Defiance Mills. And then we purchased the Brumbies from the receivers, and it was 100% franchise then. And so I was one of the directors. So it was done because Melbourne or Victoria and Queensland were still run pretty much separately. There was some common. By then we changed from old style bread centre to Brumbies. So that was when we took over on that level. So that was at a stage that we then started to expand more, and we expanded pretty much in Queensland. Like, we were very big in Queensland. We'd open a lot of stores, and then we got a master franchisee in Western Australia, master franchisee in North Queensland, and then New Zealand, and a master franchisee in South Australia. So that enabled us to scale up and to open a lot of stores. So we had we had a pretty good system, and we'd stick to it. So if franchisees didn't want to follow the system, then they'd get off the path. So the system was based on the right effort for the maximum amount of profit. So the bottom line, there's no point working and doing all that. You got to make money. Did you make money and have fun? Yes. So we had the combination. That was our philosophy.
How did you come up with that system, or what was in that system?
It just evolves. You do your best every day, and you review. So we went through a stage at Brumbies where we had a disaster. I think it was 2003 or something like that, where we had a big. In Queensland. Brumbies was leading the news in Queensland because the health department closed down. One of our franchisees had 13 stores and closed down about 5 of his stores for health reasons.
Wow!
But these were only minor health reasons. So what happened is this guy was employing someone that was affected by getting a speeding ticket or something, and when he was driving the company car and the boss wouldn't pay it, so he staged, like he got cockroaches in a plastic bag and burst them open and showed them over the floor, found some dead rats and threw them around and filmed it all and took it to Channel 7.
What?
And they then, on tonight on A Current Affair, we show behind the scenes the Brumbies. You won't believe the footage we have. So they showed that footage, and then there was an election, I think, Brisbane City Council, so they wanted to get out and close it down. So that was a disaster. Remember, I had the flu, and that was a low ebb in life. So, you don't take no for an answer, and you turn defeat into victory. So that was good. So we were able to then get in and really say to the franchisees, get behind and do it, and we pulled together, and we grew from there. That's when, I think at that stage, we put together a strategic business plan. The shares were listed, I think they were around below 50 cents. So we put together this plan, and in 2.5 years we had them to $3.60.
Yeah, wow. That's huge.
Yeah.
What do you think led to that happening?
Oh, just because we had I don't know, you write down all your problems, you look at them, you find solutions, and you work through them one by one, and you just determined. So that's what we did, and we were that sick. We wrote down, you got to have a BHAG, you know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, big, hairy, audacious goal. So we had it. We said when the shares were 50 cents, so we sat down as a group and said, okay, the BHAG is we're going to double our share price every 12 months, okay, from 50 cents to $1 to $2, yeah. So, and we're on course with the BHAG when in 2007 when the hostile takeover occurred with Retail Food Group.
And what was the process like of listing?
Oh, we had to list because we started off with 50 franchisees, and so when you got that many shareholders, and then they started, there was all the shares were 1 cent. These shares that sold for $3.60 eventually, they were all 1 cent that they were issued at. So, and they were diluted, and so you'd end up. It was only the original shareholders that got them, but then they started selling them, and the value of them went up. So once you get over 50, you have to be a public company when you have that many shareholders, and so then you need a market, and there's all the regulations with that. So if somebody wanted to sell their shares, then we have to wait to the end of the financial year, get the results, get an independent valuation. So that was the only time that you could sell, and people wanted to sell more. So therefore, we listed on the second board of the stock exchange. They used to have a secondary board then. So that was called the Newcastle or the Bendigo Stock Exchange or something. Anyway, but it was the same rules. It just had the same rules applied, but you had less compliance. It's very expensive to list on the ASX. Cost you, I don't know, $600 to $1 million a year just to be on there. So that's why we listed in order to frame a market. So they didn't trade heavily. So, but then some venture capital got in, and they started buying shares, and so we had a venture capitalist on the board, River Capital out of Melbourne. I think they got on in at about $1.10, and as soon as they got to $2.20, bingo, they want to sell. So they did a deal with RFG. Then that's when I put up in conjunction with two other directors. That's when we put up the management buyout. So we put that together and drove the price up. And we were within a whisker of achieving that, and they came back because they at the time Retail Food Group went out and bought Michelle's. I don't know if you read the news lately about Michelle's. Michelle's used to have 400 stores. I think they're down to 12. They were really big in Sydney. They're down to 12, and they're going to change. They're gone. So with Brumbies, we had 321. There was about 50 in the pipeline ready to open. So I don't know, it's nearly 17 years ago, and I think the last thing in their disclosure document, they're down to less than 60 now. So they've all closed. So anyway, but it was just because when we used to run Brumbies, we always were celebrated. The franchisees made money, so you don't want to get too greedy and take, so you got to have the needle in the middle of franchisee profitability. So when you're taken over by a roll-up, company like that, they weren't so much interested. They said they were, but they weren't really interested in the strength of and profitability of the franchisees. They wanted to move the needle, and so the franchisees are basically working for wages by the time, because they increase the price of the supply, and they take the money for advertising and spend it on head office expenses and all that. So I got involved, and there was a Senate inquiry about 8 years ago into franchising, where the government investigated, and I appeared before the Senate inquiry, and it was all really based around the things that were occurring. There's a lot to do with wage theft, and Adele Ferguson, she writes for the Sydney Morning Herald, she wrote a big article, and I was one of the people that talked, and all the Michelle's people, because they were on a different thing where they had to buy frozen products, and anyway, it was just a disaster. And I think their share price got up to about $7, and I think now it's about 4 cents. It's amazing it's still there. But just a couple of weeks ago, they announced all the Michelles were going. I was amazed because I hadn't seen any Michelles around, but that was a brand that was that's gone.
Yeah, like Brumbies as well.
Well, Brumbies are still there, but they still own other things like Crust Pizza and Pizza Capers, Donut King, and Gloria Jean's. They still own them. Anyway, we digress.
It's interesting. So how do you think, just going backwards a little bit, sorry, how did you guys go about choosing franchise locations?
Well, I've written a book about it, and there's a thing in there. So it was all of those steps. So when you're choosing a location, you got to look at access, exposure, tenancy mix, and ant trail. You got to look for those things. So access to a store that you have, you got to have clear access. So you can't have steps in front of it. So if you ever see a retail thing with steps at front, it doesn't really work that much.
Why is that?
It's a barrier to entry. People just want to walk up to the counter, and when you're in the buying mode, why you buy. There's a book by Packer, somebody called The Science of Buying. There's a lot of what happens is that when you're in the buying mood. So the access. So you need to be able to, and then as well as that, generally we'd locate a store outside of Coles or Woolworths. Didn't really work well outside of an IGA. You need to be a Coles or Woolworths. So when you're in there, we could compete against their in-store bakery and plant bread, and so you'd buy it on the way out as you leave. And then the other thing is that if you're near back then it used to work a newsagents, but newsagents are gone now, and a chemist shop, and so if you're other fresh foodies, so that would work. So it was always good to be, you're on the ant trail between exiting the supermarket and you top load some of the products on there. So Vegas Delight still use that formula on the way to the car park. So because you don't want to put your bread at the bottom and all your groceries on the top, so you buy it on that way. So exposure. So it's got to be easy to see. So like when we look for a new site, I wouldn't. They'd say, there's a new shopping centre. There's a shopping centre, or there's a new shopping centre coming, and I wouldn't look at a Refidex or well, now you've got Google Maps or whatever, because you should be able to find it. If you drive down a main road, then you should be clear where it is. The entrance of the car park's got to be easy to find. So all those things just got to flow. And access, exposure, and tenancy mix. I spoke about tenancy mix and ant trails. And so you've got to observe. So if you decide to put a retail outlet somewhere, you should spend a week or so hanging around, looking, seeing what happens. No point just going there on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday morning. So you want to look at it at all times, particularly if you've got a 7-day business. So therefore, and you'll see humans are like ants, and that they'll go places that whatever, there's a good side of the street and a bad side of the street, and they'll avoid this and they'll avoid that. You just got to get on the ant trail. And so they're the things that we used to look at. I think we also had a formula where you put all this into a matrix and it'll feed out and predict the turnover. But that was never as good as your gut feeling, because I'd looked at a lot of stores. So you're able to, if you use those simple things, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And how did you go about assembling the team then, I suppose at a corporate level, that took you guys from the 3 to the 300 stores? I mean, do you have a framework for hiring?
Yep, you got to incentivize your team. So we use a thing called golden handcuffs. So you pick the people you want to keep, and if you identify the people you don't want to keep, and the people you want to keep, you offer them. We offered them when the shares were 50 cents. We offered them options to buy at 50 cents, and then we then had a scoreboard. They could look at that. So a lot of them made substantial amounts of money that when the buyout occurred, because and we all sat around and said, right, we want to do this BHAG of doubling the price. And anyway, BHAG's supposed to be unachievable, but like Microsoft and Bill Gates, he came out with a BHAG of wanting a computer on every desk in every school in the world, and I thought he was crazy. But there you go. So his program used in that in all those areas. So some people achieve the BHAG, but they're supposed to be unachievable.
Yes. What about, you touched on there, what about private companies that are maybe not yet listed and can't offer options? How would they go about?
Oh, well, there are other ways that you can you got to incentivize them in the right things and be very careful. So if you incentivize someone, then they may go, if you've got a leasing agent, you incentivize them on doing deals, then they're just going to do any deal to get the commission. So you've got to incentivize them so that they're aligned with the overall focus of the total group. So if you haven't got a listed entity, you can offer them units in the company if it's a private company, or you can offer them a reward. I now work at Sentinel, so you can offer them, and they vest over 3 years, and if they leave during that time, then they forfeit it. So, there's some, something on the horizon for them to focus on, push on to, and that when things get tough, they stick on, and it's the thing we call, they use the owner's eye. So they would treat the company as though they own it themselves, and every dollar they spend is, what's the best way to spend it? So you look at that. So the owner's eye is one thing that's gone, because that's really, the owner's eye is the essence of franchising. Because if you've got a company store, and a lot of people are able to run company stores really well, like Grilled do company stores really well, and they do franchising as well, but different. So companies look at that. But if you are, so Brumby's originally was 100% franchising, and we started to do some company stores because the various stages the board wanted to do it, but we really focused on, we were always much better at, so the company stores never performed as well as when you had the owner's eye, because the owners are in there and the going get tough, the tough get going, so therefore if you're about to, it's Friday afternoon and the phone rings and I don't know, I'm out of here, I'm not answering it. If you answer the phone and, it could be someone with a big order for the next day and they're going to ring your competitor. So an owner will answer that, and an employee may say no, whereas a well-incentivised employee who's got the owner's eye. So you've heard that Kerry Packer story, haven't you? Mm-hmm. Kerry Packer was at a casino in London or whatever, and he came out of there early in the morning, and there were 2 hamburger shops or whatever. He had a hankering. I think he just used to drink Fanta, old Kerry. But anyway, but he was hungry, and he went to the first hamburger store and wanted a water, and the bloke said, "Oh no, we're closing up, mate," And he went to the one next door, and the guy was in the same thing, or another hamburger store nearby. And he said, "Oh, sure, yeah, we'll make it up." So he fed all of these entourage. And at the end, Kerry got his checkbook out. They had, you know what checkbooks are?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay. So Kerry got his checkbook out and said, here's £50,000. Now, that is one condition. Tomorrow I want you to go and show it to that bloke up the road.
Is that right? I didn't know that story.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was a lot of good Kerry Packer stories. You do a whole podcast on them. You're in Sydney, mate.
So, so that's very interesting. So, incentivization is a really big piece of acquiring and I suppose keeping a great talent. What else?
Oh, having fun.
Okay.
Making money and having fun. You got to enjoy it. If you don't wake up in the morning and say, "I want to get to work and get going," and you enjoy the people you're with, and then you should get another job. So you got to enjoy what you do and look forward to it. So you put your head on the pillow at night and you review your day and what could I have done better or whatever. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're keen to get there and get on with it. So you got to find people that are happy in what they're doing. And so you got to, what I call, spend some fun tickets, money, so for enjoyment, for whatever it is, the culture of your company or whatever. Like at Sentinel, we've done lots of incentive trips where you go away because you don't really know someone until you go on business trips or whatever. So we'd travel, we'd go to different Asian countries, and so everyone's in they don't know the currency, it's a new this and everyone's in the same boat. So just go away for 2 or 3 days somewhere and then learn some different culture or whatever. I'd take them to, Borobudur or whatever in Yogyakarta in Indonesia, and you look at the ancient things there and learn a bit. Anyway, we used to do things like that. But whatever it is, you just it's got to be a good, fun environment where people are enjoying going to work.
If I'm a founder that's maybe in a position where I've got 5 locations, maybe I own all 5 of my retail locations, and I'm now deciding, do I keep them and own them and grow that way, or do I start to franchise out? What is your advice?
Well, it depends on whether you've got it's duplicatable and scalable. So, and what you got to do is run them. So generally, a lot of stores are successful because you're the owner. If you've got 5 stores, you can't work in all 5. So therefore, you've already got a system where you've got people in there. So the first thing I'd look at is the people that are working for you, and they're probably going to be your best first franchisees or whatever. So you look at that's what we started doing, and you'd see if any of them want to be recruited and work in there. And there's lots of instances where we had apprentices that started and they end up owning a store. There's lots of that occurs. So you'd look at the people in there, and then but you got to be pretty certain that you got a scalable, and that and if you're doing franchising, then you got to take 7% plus 3% off the top for franchise fees, because if you're going to provide support to them, so initially, the management support for people, so that's got to be able to pay that, and then there's still enough money for them to service their debt, pay their wages, pay all of the expenses, and then to still make a profit. So that's what I'm saying. It's got to be scalable and profitable. So if you've got that, then then you can start working on that franchising. Franchising is still a wonderful system, provided you get the fairness gauge in the middle, so that the franchisor's got to make money in order to survive. They've got to pay their head office expenses and get a return on their investment. The franchisee's got to be able to make money.
Yeah, it's got to balance out. Is someone that's been through the process of franchising, is there a specific way that you would look at or that you would calculate how to get that as fair as possible?
Yeah, well, each of the franchisees should show you their results. So they should be doing monthly, weekly, all of the reports in there, and you look at that and you benchmark it and you see. So that would include the taxation returns, and provided there are various times in there that you may need to support your franchisee and give them some assistance depending on what there's roadworks occur, or we've been through COVID, so that was a whole different thing. So therefore, if you support them and they're worthy of support, but if you find out the franchisee got a gambling problem and they're never going to be successful, and you've got to move them on, so to speak. Or one of the things we used to look at, we used to have awards, ceremonies, franchisee of the year and all that. So it was generally a bit of kiss of death if you won an award, because they think, oh, well, look at me, how successful I am. And they'd stop doing what they were doing to be successful, go off to Disney and they'd put a swimming pool in, buy another car or whatever, and take their eye off the ball. And so you always had to make sure that, that business coaching, the various stages that they go through, that they continued to do what they did to get them successful, and don't think cash flow is profit.
What are, again, you've been through this process, advice to someone that's looking to go through a franchising process now or looking to expand through franchising? What are roadblocks that you foresee, or common roadblocks that pop up?
Well, it depends on, what sort of franchise you've got, whether it's a service industry or it's a retail in there, whether, like if you've got a gym, for instance, when 24-hour gyms first started, then there's not a lot of labour there, because people are accessing your equipment. So it's all capital equipment, but then they make the money out of personal trainers, even though you go there and just get on a jogging machine. Generally, they try to upsell you with personal trainers. So if you got that, whereas if you got a food franchise, then you've got your big costs of wages and cost of goods, the ingredients that you're doing. So you got to have all of those under control. But if it's duplicatable and scalable, and you as the founder have got a passion for it and can go through the journey, then you're sure you can do things. Like, it's interesting, you still observe new things coming up. There's that cookie thing in Brisbane called Brookie or something. Is that right?
Yes, the book, the Brookie cookie book.
Yeah, well,
and
maybe
the
they make more
location.
money out of selling books, but whatever. But people queue up to buy those cookies. But I was somewhere this morning in Parramatta, and there were all those exactly the same cookie was in a cabinet in a coffee shop. So other people are selling them, but so they've got a brand and a buzz and all of that. So you do need that mystique and that brand and that marketing, that you've got, and then other people will copy you. So that's But then I know another ex-franchisee friend of mine. He started Daniel's Donuts. You probably haven't heard of them up here in there, but down in Victoria. But I think he sold them. But he took a busted ass Baker's Delight store in Springvale and started making donuts. Because if you look at a Brumby store, the money you make is in the front counter. So that's all the small things like, cheddar mite scrolls and pizza buns and all that. So you're selling those for $3, $2.50, $2.20, and a loaf of bread you're selling for $4. So, and the amount of ingredients, so that you make your money out of that. So he decided he was just going to sell donuts and pies, and it became a phenomenon that the Daniel's Donut story. So they started making, luscious looking donuts where you dress them up and put different things on them. There was, I was on the board of Krispy Kreme for about 7 or 8 years. So after I left Brumby, so you'd think that's just a license to print money, and because they're making the donuts very cheaply, but their business model just didn't work, and we had to completely restructure it to what you see it is now.
Why is that?
Oh, because when they'd open, they'd have queues of people getting in there to buy donuts, and then it'd fall off pretty rapidly, and then they'd have these big stores, and they only really had about 4 meters of retail space, where the donuts and the coffee were. And but they'd have these massive store, and the amount of rent and everything they were paying, so they just over expanded, and they didn't. Your rent's always got to be a percentage of your turnover, so that's why you got to be looking at your bottom line all the time. So, and it's got to be, I say it's scalable and repeatable. So that wasn't repeatable. So so you had to adjust the model, have smaller stores, not big stores where you're catered for everyone. And then, I was involved in doing the deal with 7-Eleven, selling them in those areas, because they used to sell, I think it was sale or return. That was another issue, that they'd sell to Woolworths. Anyway, I shouldn't give away trade secrets so much on that. I've been out of there for a while now. But that's, there's always things when you look from the outside, you look in the shop window, you think, gee, that's, look at that, that's a beauty. So I'm always looking at retail and trying to work it out. Why does it work? Why is this? Why is that? There's various things that happen there, and trends that occur. There are trends happening all the time. You just got to be on it. But there's never been a better time to be in business than now. Like, it's such an exciting time with everything that's available to you, the marketing and the digital stuff that wasn't available in our day. So talkability and branding and what people can do.
What are trends that you see now?
I don't know. It's still the basic things, but like I'm involved now in shopping centres. Like we own a couple of big shopping centres in Mackay and Darwin, Sentinel Property Group, and so there's a number of various things. You look there, like we got a store in a big shopping centre in Mackay in Caneland. And a bakery opened there. It was a bakery owned by some Vietnamese, and I thought, oh well, they're going to open what we call a cold spot in the shopping centre, and they just blew the doors off. But because they had really good product that was fit for the market in Mackay. There was mainly sweet things they made and delivered in. So I was quite surprised at that. But then in that centre, we've got two pretty identical offers at an entrance to the centre. They sell coffee, they do breakfast, lunch and dinner. And one of them's a well-known franchise brand that's become stale and hasn't kept up with. The one's an independent owned by a guy. And so, one of them outtrades the other one by 10 to 1. So, so franchising isn't always the answer. You got to make sure that if you're going to buy into a franchise system, that you're buying into one that's relevant and vibrant.
How do I work that out?
You got to go around. I'd say for every 10,000, well, I used to say every 1,000, but for every say $5,000 to $10,000, spend an hour on research. Because look, like if you're going to buy McDonald's, they're still the benchmark, the most successful, and they make you work in there for 12 months and do everything before you're on a queue and before you can buy in. So you got to do your research. Go and talk to as many people that work, people that haven't worked. Figure out whether it's what's at fault. You got to go around and ask as many people as you can. Don't get starry-eyed and just walk straight in and buy it off the showroom. Do your research. Spend a lot of hours. We used to encourage people. We used to it was called observer baking. Because if you want to own a Brumby store, you had to get up 2:00, 3:00 in the morning.
Wow,
and
so early.
Well, because you got to bake everything.
Yeah.
Because when you open, you got to have all the products available. So we used to try and encourage them to do continuous baking. If you let bakers do it, they'd get in at 9:00 and then finish up and put the shutters down and let the shop people come in and start selling later on. But so we wanted to get the smell of bread when the bread was being sold. That was a key thing that used to drive sales. But we used to do observer baking. We'd say to somebody, well, if you're a public servant, then that's all very well and good. Take a week off before you resign your job and go in and be an observer baker at your nearest store and just see what you think, whether you can do this, because once you start it, there's no going back. So, do as much as possible with the research. That's what I'd say if you're looking at buying into something. There's no right answer. Like everything is different, everyone, but it's the attitude of the person behind it that can do. Don't take no for an answer. That turn defeat into victory, obstacles into stepping stones.
Yeah, that's very true. Have you got any? Maybe you can share stories. I know you obviously with Sentinel now. What has it been like looking back, going through COVID?
Going through COVID, well, who would have thought? So no matter. Well, I remember. Were you around for Y2K?
I know the story, but I wasn't around. No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what happened is that when everyone thought that and the banks and everybody thought, okay, when Y2K happens, that planes will fall out of the sky.
What was
Because all
it?
the computers, everything had a computer chip on it, because they'd only went up to 1999 and then they couldn't go to 2000. That's what they thought. Anyway, nothing happened. But the banks would say, what's your policy for this and that? So you can never predict. So everyone predicted that was going to be a disaster and the banks wouldn't lend you money unless you had a Y2K thing that you had it all worked out. Anyway, nothing occurred. Everything just kept going. It just went over to 0, 0 and 1, 1, 0, 0. And anyway, so with COVID, nobody could have predicted it. Nobody I think more people die of COVID now than they did in the peak. But it was just crazy paranoia that the governments overreacted. Cause everyone was new to it, that there's going to be another one. Like it's nature's way of sort of slowing us down, possibly. So therefore, when I can remember in Queensland, it was a Friday and it was Valentine's Day on Saturday or something, and 3 people got COVID, and they said at 9:00 in the morning, righty, everyone's got to go into lockdown at 4:00 this afternoon, and all those poor businesses that Valentine's Day with flowers, and they bought everyone was booked into restaurants to do this and do that. So they just wiped all those people out. So it's made people more resilient that we've gone through that and we're survived and whatever. Everyone thought it was the end of the world. I remember at Brumby, at Sentinel, the retailers wanting reduction in rent and everything. So it turned out to be the greatest retail boom ever, that just refocused us. And so, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So, you've been through it. We're a lot better for it. We can learn from it and we won't make the same mistakes. And, unless you're, Dan from Victoria.
You've been through quite a lot of challenges. Do you have a specific personal process that you go through, or rituals or habits that you rely on to take you through those moments?
Probably not. No, we always write a list down of all the things that you think's going to happen, and then find solutions for it. So don't panic or freak out. Just systematically work through it. There's been a couple of times in my journey that I've come close to the edge, and you just reflect and look and process and work out a plan to get through it. I haven't gone bankrupt. I come close a few times, but they're the times where you learn from.
It's true.
The other thing is, in like investing in Sentinel, I think I've been able to double my money every 5 years by investing in Sentinel, because that's just what the returns you get, because the IRR that you get out the fundamentals. After I sold Brumbies, I got an amount of money, but it wasn't enough that you could do nothing. But I didn't want to go back in and get a full-time job, so I wanted to do things that I enjoyed, because I was only in my 50s or whatever, I had a young family. So my wife and I owned a number of Brumby stores. We still sort of had those, but then you had to find something to occupy yourself. So that's what I that's when I wrote the book Jump Shift, which is out of print, and that's when at the same time I then had some money that we put in the super fund. So when we sold, Peter Costello put out a thing where you put $1 million into superannuation, and you only had to pay 30% tax. So that problem is when you have a capital event, you've got to pay a lot of tax. So we put the money into super, and then then I put it into a self-managed super fund, and then the super fund, rather than putting in an industry fund, and then you control where it goes under the rules and the regulations. So we initially put them into the share market and bought units, units and houses. That we thought that was a spread that we'd put our investment into. So this was in 2007. In 2008 we had the GFC.
Yes.
And so the share price, so you lost, you go to a share broker and he'd say ABC Learning Centres, they're now zero. B, Babcock and Brown, yeah, sure, I'll have 100,000 of them, they no longer exist. C, Sentinel Properties, you put some in good ones, BHP and Westpac and Commonwealth Bank or whatever, but like when you invest in something, when you're your own owner of a business, you control the levers, you know all the risks, and it's not risk for you because you understand it and you can do things for it. But when you invest with something, you've got no idea, you've got no insight. It's long-term gambling, really. But if you invest in basic things, but you really don't have any control. Like look at Telstra shares, they still never recovered to where they were. So even though that's a big company, so therefore the value that I had of the money that we put into the super was diminished. So then this guy Warren Ebbett is a friend of mine. He started Sentinel, and he bought an industrial property syndicated in Kerry Road, Archerfield, in Brisbane, and I put an amount of money into that, and we got returns. So you got about 7% return or whatever. So and then he started doing other things, and I used to go into every second one, put 100 or 200,000 into every second one, and that was the best perform. So people would say, don't put all your eggs into one basket, but if it's a good basket, it's okay, I thought. So it ended up that my wife and I, Jenny, we put 100% or, initially 100% into different funds in Sentinel, and Sentinel's achieved, it's been going for 15 years, an IRR, internal rate of return, of 19.6%. So overall, I've done a bit better because I was in the earlier ones that used to pay 12%.
Yes.
So by the time you do a blend of your monthly return and then your capital growth, then when the products are sold, then you get your money back, and then if you're reinvested. So we've been able to double our money every 5 years in the super fund. So by investing in there, and I work there, so that gives me a lot of pleasure and enjoyment. But if you got you do need a super fund. If it gets big enough, do it self-managed, and make your own things. If you don't understand something, don't invest in it. I don't understand Bitcoin. A lot of people have made a lot of money out of it, but to me it's gambling. But I'm sure it's fun, if you got into it early. I could have got into it early. I was at a meeting in New York with where they were talking about blockchain and Bitcoin. And I remember thinking, oh, God, what's that? Anyway, so there you go. I could have got into it. But they, what the initial people that got into it.
Early.
You know what they were, don't you?
Yeah.
Drug dealers and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was like the black web. And so they would, do deals, and on Bitcoin because it wasn't traceable or whatever. Not all. Anyway, so it's gone. But who would have? But I don't understand it, so I've never invested in it. So I'll only invest in things that I sort of understand.
And Sentinel primarily has commercial?
Yeah, commercial. We got office, industrial, retail, properties. We got some infrastructure. We own a ferry terminal in Airlie Beach. So you can invest $100,000. You got to be a sophisticated investor. That's a test the government sets, and that there are ways that you can get around that by investing more than 100. We take the minimum ticket price of 100,000. So you put the money in, we pay you a monthly return. So at the time, my wife and I had 7 investment properties, plus we had the shares. So I got rid of all the shares and sold all the investment properties, sold all the Brumby's bakeries we had, and put it into Sentinel. No, we had a unit in the city in Brisbane, right at Roma Street in Brisbane, right in the city. I think we paid $800,000 for it. This was in 07 or 08 or something like that. And it was in the super fund. We didn't have a mortgage. I rented it out directly. It was always very lettable. But the return you got by the time you took into body corporate insurance and rates and all that sort of thing, I didn't have an agent once again, and the return you got was about 2% or something really on that, which was, you get better by just putting your money in the bank, but you need that capital growth. So I think I had it for 6 years. So I bought it for 800, sold it for 880. So by the time you take into account stamp duty and selling commission, that was when I took that money, whatever I had, the 820 left over, I put it into Sentinel, and I was getting 9.5%, and you didn't have to do anything. So I didn't get called up and say my vertical blinds are broken or someone's dropped a spoon into the incinerator and it wasn't me. You're going to come and replace the incinerator. So you can then get a slice of commercial property, not have any exposure or risk or whatever, and get a good return, and you get the capital growth. Now, mind you, if I'd bought that, if I'd waited another 10 or 15 years, I would have got good growth. Now, maybe it's worth, 1.4 or something, but it's still not significant. But there are, in the property market, you can make significant money if you pick the right cycle to buy into, and, because some of the prices are really run. So what we do is give people exposure to commercial property in small slices. So you get a unit in a unit trust, and we're like the body. It's like buying a unit in a block of flats, and we're the body corporate manager. We manage it for you. So, yeah, it's never been easier making money.
If you could go back and give yourself any advice, what would it be?
Well, it was interesting because coming here today, you're in North Sydney, and I caught a train from Wynyard Station. And I remember when I was young, I had three ambitions, because I grew up as working class. My father worked in the railways. I had 3 ambitions. So one was I wanted to see snow, but I had never seen it. 2, I wanted to fly in an aeroplane. I never flown in an aeroplane. And 3, I wanted to go across the Sydney Harbour, because I hadn't been out of Victoria. So they're not very big ambitions, really. So, so generally you find that, I haven't really had a lot of ambition of wanting to do things. So you need to set targets or whatever and goals, and just slowly work through them, and you can achieve a lot. That's have better goals than the 3 things that I had, because they were really easy to get. I got them by the time I was 18, I think.
At the start, you said to me, I must ask you about TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor.
TripAdvisor, yeah, that's right. Well, there you go. That's one thing that, just as a challenge, in 2017, I was the number one reviewer in the world for TripAdvisor in hotels and restaurants.
What? How did
So-
that happen?
Oh, because when TripAdvisor first started, you started doing things, and then they'd send you a report. I haven't been on it lately, but they send a report saying, "Oh, you're number 357 reviewer in Brisbane or something." And I thought, I'll see what I can do. So, because I travel a lot, then I thought, okay, I'm going to write a few reviews. But then a lot of people, when they wrote reviews, you got to write 100 words. So you got to be there because they GA tag you. But then there's no point writing 1,000 words. So write 100 words. Once you get to 100, that's okay. Then tick, you got one. So, you'd write about a hotel or a place you went to. And I think at that time we travelled with the family. We went to Cuba. It was a bit of a disaster in Cuba, but we had a lot of time there. So anyway, I spent time in airports and that sort of thing and wrote a lot. And so surprise, surprise, I got a call from Singapore and they said it was TripAdvisor and they wanted to make sure that I was real. So I wanted to be number one in Australia. So I ended up being number one in the world. So people try and get the Guinness Book of Records and be number one in the world for something. So since then, I think I've written 2 reviews. I thought, what's the point? I can't keep it up. I don't want to go forever. But I never used it. I never went into there and said, "Do you know who I am?" Because the force is very strong within me in TripAdvisor. So I never used it for evil. But anyway, that was just a bit of a challenge I set myself. So under promise and over deliver.
And you've travelled quite a lot?
Yep. One of the things I used to, because I travelled, I went to university and then I travelled the world for 4 years and didn't have any money when I left, didn't have any money when I came back. And so I used to just find ways of making money around. I never did anything illegal, like, smuggling drugs or anything like that. But I'd go to India and buy tablas and sitar and then take them to Amsterdam at the Milky Way and sell them there and make enough money then to keep going for a bit longer. So that's why I was a school teacher in London for 2.5 years. So anyway, went to a lot of countries and then always had travel broadens the mind because a lot of people, that's on their bucket list, what do you want to do or what have you. So, I enjoy travel because it challenges you. You go to new places, you see new things. The whole environment's different totally from what here. You always think Australia's the best place. We're lucky to be here and we come back here and it makes you appreciate it, but then you appreciate what else is possible. We're a bit of a nanny state there and they use Darwinism elsewhere, they haven't got guardrails here or there. If you're stupid enough, then you'll fall over the edge. So I had a thing: keep your countries visited ahead of your age. So and then anyway, I've been to 135 countries. I don't think I'm going to live to 135.
Wow, maybe.
No, I don't think so.
Looking back, if you could give advice, or I suppose even when you're dealing with young people now, is there any specific advice that you have around finding something you're passionate about?
Well, it's there. There are various passions, but the problem, I don't know, you got to look up because most people are on their screen all the time. You never look up. You'll be on the phone with your eyes down on the screen, and how are you going to find? You might find your life partner might be sitting next to you, but you both got your eyes down. So you got to look up and look around and see who's there. And things happen. You talk to people in different times at different. Like you sent me an email. I didn't know who you were. I said I'm up for anything. Yeah, like people contact me. On LinkedIn. I'm big on LinkedIn. So, but LinkedIn only allows you 30,000 members. So I've got to keep culling people because so therefore, and often people contact you and I have a coffee every day and someone will say, "Oh, can I pick your brains and have a coffee?" I'm up for it, sure. Nothing's a waste of time. You never know where it's going to lead to. I know we had an example we were in Darwin last week, with Sentinel and we met somebody and then, this guy had exactly what we're after. Surprise, surprise, but it came out during the term of the conversation. So, we just think nothing's a waste of time. You always learn something from wherever you go. So, keep an open mind and don't pat too many stray dogs, but, it doesn't hurt to say good day.
Brilliant. Michael, thank you so much for coming on.
No worries. Pleasure to be here.